Remind everyone that's in attendance, the meeting is being recorded.
So we have a quorum. It's okay to start?
You certainly may.
Okay.
Can you advance to the next slide, Jay? And Alan Leventhal is in the general panelist. Can you upgrade him for me? Thank you.
So Alan is here.
Now.
Okay. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome. As we do with all BPL meetings, we'll start by reiterating and underscoring the equity statement. The trustees of the Boston Public Library reaffirm our commitment to racial equity and the principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion more broadly. Library is formally committed to becoming an anti-racist organization in response to systemic racism, inequity, and injustice prevalent in our society. We acknowledge also that the Boston Public Library's central library stands on land that was once a water-based ecosystem, providing sustenance for the indigenous Massachusetts people, and is a place which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange among nations. We are committed to land acknowledgements for all locations at which we operate. We reaffirm this commitment to set the context for our planning, deliberations, and public engagement that will take place from the spirit of welcome and respect found in our motto, free to all. Pamela, you do the roll call now?
Sure thing. I'm just going to read last names for efficiency. Asim.
Here.
Berman.
Here.
Bradley.
Here.
Dames.
Here.
Enrique.
Here.
Faye. She was having technical issues. She's out of the country and was trying to log on this morning, so she may join us and I will acknowledge her when she does. Hawkins.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Leonard.
Here.
Leventhal.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Now we move on to the approval of the minutes of the last meeting.
Yes, please. If I may just run through the roll call again, if no one had any edits or anything. You want to make a motion to accept them, Ben?
So moved.
Second.
Wonderful. Asim?
Here.
Berman?
Yes. Sorry.
Bradley?
Berman's a yes.
Yes.
James?
James is a yes.
Enriquez?
Yep.
Hawkins?
Yes.
Johnson?
Here.
Leonard?
Yes.
And Leventhal.
Yes.
Thank you.
Before we continue with the program, I would just like to offer a public shout out and congratulations again to Alan Leventhal on being appointed ambassador to Denmark. Alan, that's quite an honor, and we wish you all the best. Are you ready to tangle with those Republicans on the Hill?
Not yet. You're very kind to make those gracious comments. I'm just starting the Senate process, so it's up to them. They have to confirm me, but I am excited about the opportunity. And my one regret is if I do get confirmed, I'm going to have to step down from this committee, but I will do my best to continue as long as I can.
That'll be great. What do you have any sense of what the timetable will be and how long the process will take?
I think it would be, it's hard to believe that it would occur any earlier than April. And it could extend beyond that in a meaningful way. It really depends. There were 46 nominations that had been held up. And there was a deal made with Senator Cruz that released those in December. But I think it's, it's a new year and we'll see. But all I can do is just take it step by step. But I should be, certainly the earliest is April, and it could well extend beyond that.
And is the process a bit like the Supreme Court nominees where they take you around to meet individual senators, or how does it work?
Yes, I believe there's a fair amount of individual meetings with senators. I think it starts with the Foreign Relations Committee. The particular subcommittee that handles Europe is chaired by Jean Shaheen. And I have great respect for her and very professional. So, I expect to be treated fairly, but it's a process and I'll have to follow that process.
Well, good luck with Ted Cruz and the others.
Thank you very much.
Ben, may I say something,
Of
please?
course.
Thank you, and thank you all for being here. And thank you, Alan, and congratulations. I want to
Thank you.
specifically thank you for the transformative work that you've done in terms of your buildings, your constructions, the health of the buildings, always being so far ahead of everyone else in all the properties that you've developed. And I know that you're going to take that transformative spirit all the way to Denmark. So we will be rooting for you and we're so honored. And I can't tell you how delighted when we invited you to be on your committee, how happy and delighted and honored we were when you said yes. So thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Priscilla.
So now we're going to move on to, or Beth, do you have anything to say at this point, or will that be later?
Later.
Beth Brenda? Okay. So we're going to discuss now the draft charter for the Special Collections Committee, which David and Beth wrote up. And I, along with Priscilla, made just a minor tweak in one phrase. But this is something that constitutes goals and rules of the road for the committee. And it was in your package of materials sent to you, but in case you haven't had a chance to read it, I thought I would just go through it quickly. It says that the purpose of the BPL Trustees Special Collections Committee staff shall be to advocate for BPL special collections, their long-term care, and for their centrality in the execution of the BPL's overall mission, to review and advise on all relevant policies that affect stewardship of and access to special collections, to receive reports on and recommendations for issues affecting special collections and comment as appropriate, to work to foster and enhance alignment between special collections, library services, and the needs of BPL's communities of users, to support and promote greater access to and engagement with special collections in alignment with the approved BPL strategy, provide recommendations to the Board of Trustees on special collections matters requiring full board approval, to advise of potential new funding and or partnership opportunities in support of special collections stewardship and outreach, to support the development of a long-range strategic plan for the special collections departments, and to advocate for and support capital project initiatives in service of the special collections. As with all BPL trustee committees, appointments are made by the BPL chair, as is the selection of a chair and vice chair. President of the library will be a voting member of the committee. Additional staff roles will be appointed as non-voting ex officio members. So does anyone have any, I'd like to briefly discuss this if there are any comments. What are people's general reactions to this?
Hi, it's Joe Berman. I think it's great. I think, special collections are an integral part of the BPL and what makes BPL such a special place. And I'm glad to see that we're integrating the special collections with the overall work of the library. So it's not sort of this island unto itself where we kind of keep special treasures and they're, sort of off site or off limits or something. I guess I would like, just it's great to see it sort of as integral to the overall mission of the library.
Good, thank you. Anybody else have any comments or suggested changes?
Ben, this is Matthew. I just wanted to also second my strong support for the general gist that these collections would be integrated into and made more accessible. I think that's that point, and identifying and focusing on that point is one to be commended, and I appreciate that.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we're all for that. Anyone else care to comment?
I guess, again, it's Joe. Since I sit on the board of the Associates of the Boston Public Library, I'm just wondering whether we should make a specific reference either to working with the associates or to work, maybe if we don't say specifically the associates, other groups in order to achieve this mission. I don't know if if any thought went into how we refer to.
Yeah, if you look at, I mean, I think it's certainly implicit in many of the bullets, but in particular, I think if you look at bullet 7, the third one from the bottom, to advise of funding and partnership opportunities. I mean, it explicitly says new, but any new opportunity can exist within the existing relationship in support of special collections, stewardship, and outreach. So, in many ways, I see, and obviously, I think the associates are preeminent among those opportunities. But again, I think because this is the trustees special collections committee, staying broad and aspirational and principled was the direction we took in choice of language.
Okay. Well, I'm wondering if on that bullet, David, we could add some language that says to strengthen existing relationships and advise of potential new funding. Would that be appropriate?
Yeah, I have no objection to that. That's at the chair's discretion. I mean, we can certainly today take notes and come back at the next meeting with one to vote on, or we could make them on the fly if there's a desire to adopt today.
So what bullet point were we referring to there?
It's the third from the bottom, the one that says to advise of potential new funding.
Yeah.
Maybe to just add to strengthen existing partnerships and advise of new potential funding. Just add those words to what did I just say? Strengthen existing partnerships.
So it would read to advise of potential new funding and to strengthen existing partnerships.
Sure.
And partnership opportunities.
Or what I thought, Ben, was to strengthen existing partnerships and advise of potential new funding and or partnership opportunities. So my insert would be the first phrase after the word to.
Yeah. I'm just taking some rough notes here.
So Joe, just so I can help Ben out here, are you saying that you wanted to have it say to strengthen existing partnerships and to advise to potential new funding and or partnership opportunities?
Yep. Yep. Exactly. Thanks, Pamela.
Okay. Pamela, you got those notes?
I do.
Okay.
Ben, could I make one comment?
Of course.
I think this is excellent, so I don't have anything to add to the comments that have been made. And you may be getting at this today, but what I would be very focused on is how do you take this charter and set of principles and translate it into priorities, which guide what we're going to do.
Right. Well, I think it's it's sort of inherently intended to be our guide in what we're going to do.
Well, I guess what I would say is it's an excellent set, but I would have difficulty. It's a general statement. It's very powerful. It's thoughtful, but how do we translate it into action? And I'm not asking for a response today, but I'm just saying that would be sort of what would be on my mind.
Yeah, and I think just to comment that in addition to this charter, which I'm glad to hear is almost universally liked as the umbrella direction, in combination then with these series of meetings that we're engaged in, which are, I think, largely, once we get to it, a very special one today, the briefings on the holdings of and work around the collections, that those two inputs together will then shape the priorities for the work ahead. And in many cases, I think these latter bullets about a long-range strategic plan for special collections, more capital, the engagement with the library, give more specificity that then has to be taken down to specific goals and tasks.
Yeah, I think this is meant to be our guiding principles, and it'll be on us to translate it into action. So any other suggested changes before we move on? So I think what we'll do then is Pamela will incorporate the word changes as you have it, and then take a vote to approve it at the next meeting, correct?
Sounds great. Thank you, Ben.
Okay. So then we're moving on. So David, are you up and with Beth on the rare books update?
I think I am going to defer entirely to my colleague Beth Brindle on the first point, and then we'll give a brief comment on item B.
Morning, everyone. I'm going to give you just a quick update on what's happening with the rare books renovation. We have spoken about it both at your orientation session and I think briefly at our last meeting. We are moving ahead. It's really exciting. The shelving installation is nearing completion. We're talking about 7 miles roughly of shelving, which is an extraordinary amount of steel. And that is just about in, which is really exciting. The next step is for us, for tracking purposes, to barcode every shelf. There are 14,000 of them. So again, this is a massive undertaking, and laying out the collection map, which includes where things fit within that shelving, that massive shelving diagram for about 240,000 volumes and thousands of linear feet of archives. And so kudos to our project management office for the years of work they've put in stewarding this project, and really for our rare books team, which is headed by Jay Michella, for all the efforts that they're putting in these final months as we prepare for reopening. This is a massive undertaking. The word unprecedented, I don't know if it has the same meaning that it used to 2 years ago, but this is something within the, certainly the last decades of special collections at BPL we've never undertaken, and it's really exciting to see us nearing the finish line. So work is now proceeding apace to test the environmental settings to make sure that the temperature and humidity for storage are set correctly and responding to external temperatures. I think, as we've talked about previously, we've created a unique, a separate envelope for this department that operates completely independently of the other systems that oversee the other 900,000 square feet of the central library. So it's really making sure that these work before we bring collections in. And now we're starting to prepare for the collection move and refining all those tracking procedures. We're still on track for our timeline to open later this year. We're refining the dates. Again, we learn as we go in terms of what kind of deltas we'll have in terms of timing. But right now it looks like we're still on track for opening later this year, and we'll share those as soon as they're finalized. The team building is also proceeding well with our hiring. Our special collections librarian, who will oversee our special collections reading room, joined us right after Martin Luther King Day. And then as of yesterday, we have hired our first archivist and are setting our start date with that person, and are hoping that our second archivist selection is imminent. So all of these things are also moving, which will again really help inform and support this effort as we move to the reopening. With the above hire of the special collections librarian, that now moves us forward to select and implement new technologies for tracking movement and collection use. Kathleen Monahan, who's filled that position, has that expertise. She comes to us from Boston College, from the Burns Library, and was in charge of the implementation of that technology there. So we're really excited to have that new expertise on site. We are developing plans for the display of special collections in the front lobby to highlight sort of who we are, what we have, and who we serve. We're really thinking about that as an ongoing effort to really provide that sort of joy of seeing what are some beautiful things we have in the collection, but also allow us to effectively rotate things out and create a plan that is sustainable for us in the first year to year and a half of being open. We're looking forward, as we get farther along in this process, to walking you, the committee, through this space in the coming months. So again, as we sort of narrow down those timelines, David and I will work with the project team and others to establish when that could happen. But it's really important and exciting for you to see this space, and so we want to help make that happen. So that's where we are. We certainly look forward. I believe our next meeting after this is in April, and I expect we will have a lot more specifics about Rare Books at that time. I'm happy to answer any questions if I can.
Thank you. I like that display in the front lobby. How big an area would that be?
So the display cases occupy, what I can do potentially is share a rendering of the space, and actually a photo of the space, to let you know what we have, but it represents, I think, 6 tall display cases, built-in display cases within the space, and I can get you a square footage. What we're looking for is displaying not just things from Rare Books, but actually things to highlight across special collections, and to really emphasize sort of what we do and what these collections are meant to do within the larger sort of public context. So we're looking for a broad range of things to get people excited about what else they could discover.
And that would be rotated on a regular basis?
Right. So for preservation reasons, we want to limit exposure of any individual items to 4 months. And so we are creating it so that we have the ability to, for instance, show something that's recently conserved, and that could swap out, or something from a major collection, whether it's our Shakespeare collection or others, that could swap out, something from our archives, so that we have the ability to be very flexible, but to let people get a taste of what's to come, both in the reading room if they were to request things physically, or in our online component.
And was one of those hires that you mentioned, was she a replacement for Laura?
No, these are all staff members that would fit within the special collections team rather than the larger collection team.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? Okay, David, are we on to you?
Yes, I will just give you a brief update. I'm pleased to announce that the Boston City Council has passed an ordinance creating a commission to handle celebration of some very important upcoming anniversaries. That ordinance still has to be signed. I think maybe she has actually signed it by the new mayor and then appointed. There are, I think, up to 45 members of the committee. And the president of the Boston Public Library is called out explicitly as a member to serve on this, although obviously that person will require support from their team in order to do this. I'm just going to read you the first paragraph so you have a sense of both what it is, its focus, and the tack that the City Council has suggested the Commission take. So, whereas Boston has the opportunity to use the upcoming 250th anniversary of 1776 in 2026, the upcoming 400th anniversary of the founding of Boston in 2030, and other significant historical anniversaries for all our local communities to tell the full range of our history, including the struggles and accomplishments of Boston's Indigenous, Black, immigrant, women's, and LGBTQ+ communities who are too often left out of the narrative. And then it proceeds according to expectations and other guiding principles. So we're thrilled to be part of this. We are looking forward to having these return special collections to participate in the telling of these stories. And additionally, we have just kicked off a new relationship with the City of Boston Archives team, with whom we share overlapping responsibility for founding records and other historical materials that tell the story of Boston. So this will be an exciting opportunity to, I think, bring our collections alive in the context of a particular way of celebrating these upcoming anniversaries. So I wanted to just share that with you. We're happy to share the full text of the commission ordinance as needed. And so, but more details at a later date as that work continues. At this point, I just want to go to item C on our report, which is really the main topic for today. And the Boston Public Library considers the cartographic holdings part of special collections. Although for now, in our second official 10-year agreement, we have custody in the care of the Leventhal Map and Education Center, which we also experience and appreciate as a department of the Central Library. And so, as are all good things in BPL, we have a level of complexity, but a level of appreciation for relationships that further our work. And so we're thrilled that the main topic to introduce you all to today is the cartographic holdings and work of the Leventhal Map and Education Center. And we are thrilled to have Alan, of course, who's been recognized already, join us today. But this part of the meeting will be led by the president and senior curator, Garrett Nelson, assisted by Emily Bowe, the assistant director. So Garrett and Emily, shall I just hand it over to you?
Great, thanks, David. Ben, Beth, are you okay if we just dive right in with our presentation?
Of course, please.
Great. Well, I'm Garrett Nelson. I am the head curator and quite recently, as of this past summer, president at the Leventhal Map and Education Center. And I'm joined today also by our assistant director, Emily Bowe. Emily.
Hi, everyone.
So we really appreciate both the invitation by Beth Prindle to present today, and also just the really tremendous leadership, David Leonard, Priscilla Douglas at the head of the library, Ben Bradley, your work in this committee. Of course, our own board chair, Alan Leventhal, who's had a really sort of amazing long-term impact on our center and on the library more generally. And what I want to do today is to talk a little bit about the center, what we have in the collections. I really want to focus a lot of the talk today on the stuff, what's in the Leventhal Center, but also with an eye towards the kind of institutional relationship between us and the Special Collections Department, the library more generally, and some of the ways in which I think the work that has been done by the Leventhal Center over the past roughly decade points in the directions of where I know Beth and others in Special Collections see the future of that department. So Again, I'm going to focus largely on the material, since I know that will be particularly exciting to this group, but I want to say a little bit by way of orientation to what the Map Center is and how it functions. So the Leventhal Center began its life in 2004, really inspired by the collecting and the philanthropy of Norman B. Leventhal, who was the lifelong Boston resident, developer, philanthropist. This is Alan Leventhal's father. Norman became interested in maps early on in his life, really saw maps as showing the story of the work that he did in Boston and in his own life there, and really wanted to make sure that work in cartographic collecting had an ongoing life in a public institution. So certainly Norman's collections were interesting to places like Harvard and MIT, but Norman was very insistent that they end up in a place where people could use them. So in 2004, the original partnership between the library and the Leventhal family began. In 2007, that relationship was formalized with the establishment of an independent center, the Leventhal Map Center at the time it was called, in a long-term relationship with the BPL. In 2011, our renovated space in the McKim building on the first floor with our exhibition gallery, teaching center, and staff spaces was opened. In 2018, recognizing the Map Center's really deep commitment to K-12 work, our name was formally changed to the Norman B. Leventhal Map and Education Center. In 2019, the center signed, together with the BPL and the trustees, a new 10-year agreement that lays out the structure of our institutional relationship. I arrived at the center just after that in late 2019. And then this past year in 2021, Connie Chin, who had been the president for about 5 years, stepped down and I stepped into her position. Within the Map Center, we have a full-time staff of 8 people, both a leadership team that consists of Emily and myself and our director of education, Michelle LeBlanc. And we have a sort of mini departmental structure within the organization, an education department focused on K-12 and what we call the CIRCLE department. That's our acronym for collections, interpretation, research, community learning, and exhibitions. So it's really that CIRCLE department that has the strongest overlap with work being done in the special collections department of the BPL. In addition, we have a number of short-term or hourly staff, including gallery attendants, exhibition designers, and research fellows. The Map Center, again, is an independent nonprofit organization. We are governed by an independent board of directors. The BPL president and the chair of the trustees sit ex officio on that board. So David and Priscilla are both members of our board of directors, but we are independently governed, independently managed. Leventhal Center staff are not BPL employees. Our budget is not BPL. And that board it really governs what we do, how we hire, how we work, and manages our relationship with the BPL. We also have 2 external committees, a board of review, that's a scholarly board that consists of cartographic experts, historians, collections focused people, and an education committee that has K-12 teachers and policymakers that sit on it. The way that our operating budget works, there's really 3 big inputs into our budget. One is our endowment from the Mapping Boston Foundation. That's the endowment that was set up by Norman Leventhal during his lifetime. About another third of our funding comes from fundraising that we drive ourselves here at the center. And then about a third comes via the BPL through contributions that are outlined in our operating agreement. In addition to that, we also have operating income that comes from grants that changes from year to year. Sometimes we have very large, oftentimes federal grants for exhibitions and other programs. I'll talk about some of our active grants later. And we have a small amount of earned income through program activities, sales of reproductions and things like that. We also have sort of supervision over some of the BPL's special collections trust funds for acquisitions. So we acquire maps into the BPL collections that are paid for by BPL money, and those maps become the property, not of the Map Center, but of the BPL proper. So when we take in new maps, those generally become the possession of the trustees of the library. So what's in the Map Center collections? One of the common misconceptions is that the sort of sum total of what we have is the collections that Norman Leventhal acquired during his life. That is a little bit true. Norman Leventhal was one of the most important and extraordinary collectors of maps, particularly Boston-focused maps over the course of his lifetime. And we call that collection the Mapping Boston Collection. But in fact, most of it is actually not physically here at the library. We have supervision and custody over it. It includes very significant holdings on the history of Boston. On the left, you see Lattre's 1764 French plan of Boston from the early Revolutionary period. Also has a really extraordinary collection of maps from we call the Age of Exploration. On the right is an extraordinary 1719 map of the world by Chatelain with some just tremendous cartouche illustrations and other really fantastic stuff. Some of these maps are on display at the Boston Harbor Hotel, and others are remain off-site under our custody. If you can go to the next slide, the bulk of, so that collection is very famously documented in the book Mapping Boston, one of the most important texts really on the history of Boston generally, and particularly on maps of Boston, published in 1999 with Norman Leventhal's sponsorship and input, and written by Alex Krieger and David Cobb. Krieger is still a member of our board. If you can go to the next slide, actually the bulk of the holdings that we work with on a day-to-day basis are in fact the BPL's collections. And these represent cartographic materials that have been collected by the BPL since it was founded in the middle 19th century. So the first roughly decade of the Map Center's work consisted of bringing these materials under intellectual control, understanding where they were, what sorts of treatment and preservation they needed, getting them cataloged, getting them documented. Some of them came from the Rare Books Department. On the left, you see a Ptolemaic atlas from 1511 that was present in Rare Books before it came to the Map Center. Many of them were in the prints department. On the right, a really beautiful George H. Walker Company, 1899 bird's eye view of Boston, one of my favorite maps to teach with. You could look at this map for a day and still not find every detail about it. If you go to the next slide, many of the maps in a map collection and the BPL's map collections are also sort of I hesitate to use the term low value, but they're not rare objects of the type that special collections has traditionally been interested in. On the left, you see a government document, a daily weather map from the US Department of Commerce from 1959, which we used in a climate exhibition. And then, as I mentioned, we also acquire using BPL trust funds, and those materials become part of the BPL collections. This is one of our newest acquisitions, a bird's eye view of Boston freight terminals. This is now the Seaport in 1903, the only state of this map that exists in any collection. So what's unique about map collections is they really span this gamut from what I've shown you, a 1511 Ptolemaic map, which really demands treatment as a rare books item, through massive government publication serials on the order of hundreds of thousands of objects. We have literally tens of thousands of topographical series that are not particularly valued individually, but have come to the BPL through its depository program. And then we also are kind of on the forefront of thinking about new types of collections, some of which are new in the sense that they're newly documented, and some of which are new in the sense that they have never been collected by the BPL before. We've been working very closely with the new lead archivist in special collections, Eve Niger, on documenting our archival collections. On the left, you see a photograph from a really extraordinary surveyor's collection of Boston that's invaluable for understanding real estate, property changes in the 19th and early 20th centuries. And we're creating finding aids and documentation for that. Again, using our staff resources and the BPL's larger kind of informational architecture for cataloging and documenting those items. And then on the right, you see a screenshot of our brand new kind of trial stage data portal. We're really the first department of the BPL that is actively acquiring digital data, born digital data in the present day. And really since the 1990s, the most important and significant maps that exist all exist largely in the form of computer readable data as opposed to paper objects. So coming up with a plan for collecting, preserving, archiving, and most importantly, making publicly accessible those types of information is really a key piece of ongoing work here at the Map Center. So again, all of these things become BPL collections. We're very insistent in making sure that we conform with special collections practices, but we also span across departments that are not special collections, including the research library, government documents, digital collections. And that means that while our kind of closest analog department in the BPL is special collections, we also have touch points all across BPL's kind of organizational structure. We also have many digitized collections that are not actually in our collections at all. The Map Center has been kind of farthest out in terms of bringing digitized material from other institutions' collections that help tell stories that are important to us. On the left, you see a British Library map from 1694, one of the first European maps of Boston Harbor. This was brought into our digital collections as part of a major effort starting in the mid-2010s to bring in digital collections pertaining to the Revolutionary period. On the right, you see a map that we just quote unquote acquired digitally from the National Archives and the University of Richmond, one of the famous redlining maps, in this case of Haverhill, Massachusetts. So we also have collections for which we do not have a paper copy of them, but we've brought in digital copies. And that reflects a growing realization that, in fact, many of the people who use our services, probably the majority, are using them in a digital environment. So we've got all this stuff. Oftentimes I use the phrase that we have 250,000 geographic objects. It's a clumsy term, but it reflects the reality that we have not only maps, but we have many map-like things like atlases, globes, ephemera, archival collections, surveyor collections. But we also have things like travelogues, timetables, we have data sets, we have compasses and instruments. We really collect in geography broadly. And so many, the bulk of those objects are what you would traditionally call a map, but many others of them are meant to pertain to the way we engage with the world geographically. And what can you do with that stuff? What's the point of collecting all that other than having it and preserving it for the future? So one of the things that we do is we enable and support original research and discovery with those collections. Sometimes that looks like very traditional scholarship. On the left, if you've not read this book by Mark Peterson, The City-State of Boston, came out about 5 years ago. Peterson's a historian at Yale, really a tremendous new look at early Boston's colonial history. If you flip to the table of content, or excuse me, the credits page of images included in this book, there's about an entire page worth of Leventhal Map and Education Center credits. Peterson used many, many maps from our collection in this book. That's a case where a scholar came to actually our digital collections to use them, but we also tried to drive research ourselves. In the middle, you'll see a digital write-up from our very first public research fellow, a scholar named Courtney Humphreys, who did a really amazing project looking at shoreline change and harbor management in Boston, and wrote up this cool kind of interactive digital piece for our website. And on the right, you see a project that we did ourselves. This combines historic analysis with modern geographic data, where we've taken historic shoreline change and compared it to Boston tax parcels to try to answer the question, how much of Boston's tax base sits on made land? And you can read the entire write-up of this. It's a really cool investigation that uses both our historic collections and computational techniques in geography. Another thing you can do with geographic collections is you can teach with them. So I mentioned that education made its way into our formal name in 2018, reflecting really our deep commitment to K-12 teaching and education. Our education team both welcomes students here to the Central Library and also goes out to classrooms and teacher workshops to teach teachers how to use maps, our maps and other maps in their classroom. We have a very kind of strong relationship with Boston Public Schools in particular. We make all of our programs free to BPS, but we work with many other districts and also teachers from across the country. So on the right, you see lesson plans and teaching material that are available for free from our website that teachers can use no matter where they are. And we do reach many teachers who are not working on Boston, but who are interested in teaching about maps at various grade levels in that way. You can go to the next slide, Jay. Another kind of prominent way that we engage with the public, and certainly one that many of you may have experienced if you've been in the Central Library at any point over the past 10 years, is that we engage the public through exhibitions. So we have a exhibition gallery here in the McKim building, where we show rotating exhibitions on various themes about maps. Currently in the gallery is exhibition that focuses on truth and lies and belief in map making. But I do want to flag exhibitions have always been an important part of the Map Center's work. We get tens of thousands of people into our collections and seeing our collections for the first time through our exhibitions, but they're also something that we have been kind of puzzling over in terms of how we'll use it moving forwards, both recognizing that exhibitions are a tremendous amount of work and sometimes are a challenge to manage with a small staff, but also thinking about what we've learned from pandemic conditions when our gallery was of course closed for more than a year along with the rest of the library, and we still managed to reach audiences all across the world through digital outreach. We don't just kind of passively exhibit by putting things in frames on the walls. We also do many adult programs. On the right, there's a pandemic era adult program with the Harvard historian Elizabeth Cohen. We worked with BPL adult programs to put this on. And you know, in this case, if you haven't read this book about Ed Logue, it's really a great one. It's not a book about maps as such, certainly a book that uses a lot of maps, including from our BRA collections. But we really try to engage the adult public, not just on old maps, but really on questions that pertain to geography and places, and thinking about Boston in particular as a place whose stories are opened up by map collections. Now, I've mentioned already, digital innovation has become a really big area of focus for the Map Center. We're really lucky to have a pretty nimble and technically sophisticated staff within our fairly small group. On the left, you see a screenshot of our Atlascope tool. This is a grant-funded project where we took about 100 fire insurance and real estate atlases of Boston and its immediate neighbors and transformed them all into a standalone app that allows you to kind of peek back through time and look at extraordinary detail about building owners, how the urban landscape has changed over time. And Atlascope has been hugely transformative for our education work and also for people as varied as the City of Boston's City Archaeology Department, teachers in schools across the city, and for more sophisticated researchers who have used this information to start to look at how to analyze Boston's historic form changing over time. And we get tons and tons of people discovering our collections for the first time because we've transformed them in this way and made new access available to them in a standalone digital setting. On the right, you'll see, or if you can just go back for a sec, Jay, we also, again, are thinking about maps not just as these paper archival objects, but also as geospatial data and how do people work with this kind of information in the present day. Here's a case where we have a lot of overlap with some of the work that BPL is doing with media literacy or technical outreach, work being done in the Kirstein Library. This is a course that we ran with funding from the Northeast Big Data Hub, designed to get people started with digital mapping and understanding what GIS, that's Geographic Information System, data sets can tell them about the world around them. Next slide. We also do a lot of sort of one-off fun things that try to get different types of audience engaging with our collections and our work. On the left, you'll see something which really blew up in a fun way last year, this digital map tool we put together in less than an hour, showing the famously wedged Ever Given ship that you, in a way that you could put it anywhere in the world. This went viral and got 10 million views within a couple of days. It's sort of a silly, fun kind of thing, but also one that demonstrated the kind of desire for people around the world to engage with maps in new ways and play creatively with maps and map making. In the middle, you'll see we have a Twitter bot that tweets out maps from our historic collections every 2 hours. It's a great way for us to serendipitously find new stuff in our collections. And a lot of map scholars and historians follow this bot and will notice new things about our collections, which is really cool. We also do a lot of kind of in-house publishing. On the right, you'll see an interview that we just published. This is connected to our data work. We just brought in a new data set about redlining maps. A graduate student who did some really sophisticated analysis, pulling in demographic data about those about those redlining maps. And our assistant curator for digital geography, Ian Spangler, did a write-up about what you can learn from that data. Next slide. We're also, constantly kind of tinkering with what it means to work digitally with collections. On the left, this is a visualization based on software from Yale's Digital Humanities Lab. This is all 11,000 of our digitized maps clumped into this galaxy according to how similar they are. And you can zoom in on this giant web of maps and see, for instance, all the blueprints clustered together, or all of the maps that show double hemispheres clustered together. And on the right, we're extending that earlier initiative around bringing digital collections on the Revolutionary War together. We just received a grant from the National Archives in partnership with the Washington Library at Mount Vernon to develop a new portal called Argo, American Revolutionary Geographies Online, where we're looking at over 24 different institutions that have revolutionary period maps that we're going to try to give a single home to. And that's really something that I think digital collections and digital libraries are thinking about more and more. DPLA, of course, has done a lot of excellent work in this area, thinking about now that you can kind of lend or collect materials without the physical friction of shipping things and registering them. What does that look like for discovering collections around themes like the American Revolution? Next slide. So really the kind of future for us is to show the BPL, show all of you, show the world that what we do is not just quote unquote old maps, though we have one of the most world significant collection of old maps, but we really are a center that drives education, inquiry, research, experiments around historical geography. This isn't our mission statement, but it's a little kind of pull quote that I like to use to describe what we do. We use maps, geography, and history to understand the connection between places and people in Boston, New England, and beyond. So really emphasizing the many, many different ways that geography helps us explore the world and reframe our perspective on it. As an example that I've given David for kind of how I see the Map Center developing over time, of course, this is a very different scale. The NYPL, as you all know, has this extraordinary Schomburg Center, which is not just a collection of historical objects pertaining to Black culture, though it is also that, but the Schomburg Center is this amazing nexus of collections, research programs, community engagements that all revolve around this theme of Black culture and Black history. In the same way, I see the Map Center developing as a kind of mini research education programming center that really revolves around this question of place and geography. And geography really is crucial. It's oftentimes left out or ignored in curricula, both at the K-12 and university level. But it's a way of understanding the world that we need to understand questions that range from social inclusion and exclusion, environmental change, politics, urban challenges, and many, many more topics. We've got an exhibition about to open on March 18th on the topic of environmental justice. It's called More or Less in Common, Environment and Justice in the Human Landscape. And I think that exhibition really goes a long way to demonstrating where we see the kind of thematic focus of the center going. That exhibition will include centuries-old maps that show Boston's spatial inequalities, as well as contemporary maps from the city and elsewhere, thinking about how a kind of spatial perspective on inequality, justice, and injustice should and could be centered in our questions about environmental change. I oftentimes use this example as a way of demonstrating how important geography is. This is this extraordinary scale model of the Boston Basin that was commissioned by the Olmsted firm in 1900. And later, in about 1905, there was this major exhibition at what used to be the Museum of Fine Arts. Here, it's now the Fairmount Copley, neighboring us. But it was an exhibition essentially of every scholarly, charitable reform organization in Boston. And the one thing that you had to look at when you came into this exhibition was this giant scale model of Boston in order to kind of put everything into perspective. This is now at the sewer plant in Deer Isle, if you want to go visit it in person. But I will note, just as an aside, at the time in the 1900s, the creators of this map said that it should come to the Boston Public Library. It's not actually at the Boston Public Library, but I use it as a metaphor for the importance of taking map making, taking geography as an introduction into many, many different themes, a kind of pathway into different collections, and really into thinking about the role of public institutions in our shared public life, of understanding our past and thinking towards our future. So on the last slide, I just wanted to flag, some of the kind of key challenges and opportunities we see moving forwards. We have, as the rest of the library, severe space constraints around collection storage, and as well as space for teaching and staff use. The Rare Books Project, of course, is going a huge way in the direction of improving that for rare books. But we certainly see a close engagement with the McKim Master Plan as one way for us to think about how our space needs fit together and dovetail with the rest of the library. There's also the question of kind of excitement versus stability, right? You can't run a long-term center just on viral apps. There's a lot of back of house work around cataloging, preservation, intellectual control of the collections that is really, really important for long-term stability. It sometimes doesn't look flashy and exciting from the front, but we're really carefully trying to harmonize our procedures with special collections around some of these long-term institutional issues like accessioning, preservation, and research access. Beth has done tremendous work, and I feel really positively about our integration with that work. We often say in 200 years, people are still going to need to be able to use these collections. And so we have to be thinking about the people using them, not just today, but also long into the future. I mentioned before, rethinking about the role of exhibitions. Exhibitions have always been a part of the Map Center and always will be a part of the Map Center. And thinking about some of the things that we were able to do during our kind of forced digital period with the pandemic closure, open up some opportunities for us to think about not totally chaining our schedule to this kind of incessant 6-month turnaround of exhibitions, but trying to work more creatively and flexibly around physical spaces and the demands of physical exhibition. And then finally, kind of trying to balance between reach and focus. People use our collections from all around the world, from very different walks of life, but we also have some key areas where we want to focus, especially on school kids in Boston, and particularly around communities that have not traditionally used research libraries. Those are major areas where we want to deepen our engagements rather than just reaching more and more people of different kinds. So I think I have used about my 40 minutes that Beth allotted to me. Both Emily and I are here to answer questions. We'd love to have a broader chat about what you all are excited about. But I just wanted to say, I think we all feel really excited that this committee has been activated in a really exciting way and points towards some of the opportunities across the whole library system of where we're all going together.
Thanks, Garrett. Was a fascinating presentation. Really interesting. These digital acquisitions that you make, do you pay for those or pay a licensing fee or to exhibit it? How does that work?
So there's certainly a trend in digital libraries to make digital assets available on very permissive licenses. For instance, both the BPL and the Map Center, the majority of our digital collections are available on essentially open source licenses. So you can take, if you were another institution, you could take the BPL's collections and exhibit them even without asking us for it by the letter of the law. We, in our past American Revolution project, we inked very specific contracts about how we would use those collections. But in this next Argo grant-funded project, we are doing more with new kind of cutting-edge digital technologies where we can show that these objects exist for instance, at the Clements Library at University of Michigan is one of our first partners, but they still maintain the intellectual control and rights to the original images.
And one note then just on that is that our digital collection service is very much respecting and aware of copyright law. So the only things that get digitized and that are under those very permissive licenses are things where we as the Map Center or the BPL have the copyright and the rights to those things, or where the copyright has lapsed and things have gone into the public domain.
Give us a sense of your visitors in a non-pandemic world. Who typically comes to the Map Center? Is it mostly K through 12, education based, or as opposed to walk-ins from the public?
So it's a lot of both, and it somewhat depends on what you exactly mean by visitors. Visitors to the gallery, actually the bulk of them are kind of casual visitors, either tourists or people who are visiting the library for other reasons and happen to pop in. We've been one of the only kind of exhibitions that you can see at the library for several years now, with Rare Books being closed. So we get a lot of people who, are here for tea, or they're, here to check out books, and they pop in, and that's a really great way for us to get people who are not kind of part of the choir already interested and engaged with maps. Our more active efforts definitely focus around both K-12 and university education, bringing school and group visits here. And then our research reading room, is focused primarily on individuals, who need to use our paper collections and access collections in that way.
Mm-hmm. And the March 18th exhibit you mentioned, will that still be virtual or hopefully?
It will be
real?
in person if we get through this next month and a half without any more variants. We've been open since September 10th of last year with the Bending Lines exhibition. That will close on March 4th. And then we'll reopen on March 18th with the new environmental justice show. I'd love to have you all down here. In fact, if the committee wants to arrange a special committee visit, we'd be happy to kind of show you around and have a get together with you all.
So I want to put in a big plug to get there before the exhibit closes on the 4th, if you haven't seen it. And Garrett, partly you're using maps to tell stories and to engage the public in really difficult and challenging conversations. And this Maps with Deceptions, could you say a little bit about the current one? Because I hope that everybody, I think a lot of members of the committee have already been there to the exhibit, but could you say a little bit about that exhibit?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Priscilla. So the show up right now, I'll try to give a really brief capsule of it. It's called Bending Lines, Maps and Data from Distortion to Deception. And what we really are trying to show is that every kind of map shows a kind of bias or a perspective on reality. There's no way of saying some maps are true and some maps are false, some are accurate and some are inaccurate. But instead, what we need to think about is how and why and in what settings maps are circulated. So we look at maps from the 16th century that were grappling with, new knowledge about the round Earth. We look at maps that were produced during the coronavirus pandemic, both real news and fake news. And we're really trying to think about how every way of portraying reality in a map involves the perspective of the map maker. And the Bending Lines was really, I would say, our first major foray into thinking about theme-driven exhibitions that draw both on our really profound historical collections as well as original, there's stuff in it that we commissioned for this show. There's kind of digital interactives that go with the show as well. I'll also drop a link. That show was supposed to open in May of 2020. Of course it didn't. So we put up quite hastily a digital exhibition using some brand new technology from the Getty Research Institute for publishing exhibitions online, and it won a lot of awards for its digital engagement. So if you can't visit us in person, though I'd love to have you here, you can also see most of the show online.
So one thing that you're probably already doing, but that's had a disproportionate impact at other places where I've served, if you have a couple of bright summer interns that can be either high school or college students, and you just populate Wikipedia with images and paragraphs, it just has an absolute disproportionate image, because then, you know, you get 1 million, 10 million, 100 million impressions on your key maps, and you become the reference point for mapping, etc. And, you know, those are the maps that get reproduced, and those are the maps that become a part of school projects, and that's what brings you to exhibits. And it, you know, you pay an intern not that much money and get a tremendous marketing hit for your center.
Yeah, it's the Map Center has actually been doing this for many years. When Eben English, who you all may know is the head of the repository system, recently started doing some Wikipedia ingests of the digital collections, we were looking and we were like, well, most of the maps actually have already been brought over to Wikipedia. So we had a lot of web traffic via Wikipedia. You know, one of the challenges with digital collections is sort of measuring impact, right? Once something ends up, one of our maps ends up on Wikipedia, we sort of, people can use it freely without even asking us, which is great. I'm very much in favor of that, but it's hard for us to actually say, oh, you know, 10,000, 100,000 people, where has this been used? Because it's sort of freely out there in the world.
Jay, I think your screen just dropped.
Hey, Garrett, I was really intrigued by your discussion of sort of the digitally native data that we have, and how I'm just curious what the role of the Map Center is relative to the library, and how we think about taking some of the educational aspects of what you're doing with the old data with the new data, especially since so much of the new technology around geotagging and thinking about different effects in different neighborhoods, as you mentioned, in environmental, or you know, the discussions about inequality could be so useful, and from an educational perspective for helping, you know, people understand those issues in a more tangible way. You know, how do you think about building some of the educational stuff that you've done around physical maps around that, and how does it work around creating those? Because I think those databases exist in lots of different places, so the library probably has to get access to it and then offer access out, and it just, you know, maybe for, you know, people over 50, that's really complicated. So how does the library think about packaging all that together in a way that's really accessible and that can help drive the educational mission of what you and the library are trying to accomplish?
Yeah, Jeff, it's a great, it's a huge area of focus for us. Thanks for the question. So as one example, our K-12 team started a new high school elective course in the civics curriculum called Maptivists, where they work with modern geographic data around everything from race and income, you know, housing, things like that, in order to show kids how to make their own original maps that explore their neighborhoods, the city more generally. One of the things that we recognize from a collection and research perspective is that we're living in a world that's kind of awash with free open data sets, but that are nevertheless mostly inaccessible to people who don't have pretty advanced technical knowledge. So we really see ourselves as a key mediating institution between the, you know, these amazing resources, but that are not particularly accessible without human help or without institutions like ours that are dedicated to working with non-specialist audiences. So that Making Sense of Maps and Data adult education course that I showed you was our kind of first step in that direction. We're designing these bespoke digital infrastructures to try to offer data access to people who have not worked in these kind of ways before. You know, even the city, for instance, offers a lot of data on its you know, through its data systems that if you're not a technical expert in these things, it essentially may as well not exist. So, you know, I see both us as a Map Center and libraries more generally as being a key institution that allows people to work with this information that's now available. You know, 100 years ago, if you wanted data about the city, right, you know, budgets or population, you would go to the library and you would pull physical volumes with statistics and things like that. We have that same responsibility today, but the context is that it's all digitized information. So, you know, we talk a lot about trying to twin technical infrastructure and social infrastructure. We're both building our own tools for making maps and accessing that kind of data. And then we're talking about how do we make reference librarians available for that kind of work? Our assistant curator for digital geography has been fielding a lot of new requests for assistance in that kind of way. So it's absolutely at the center of where we're trying to grow and provide more services.
So an admission and then a question. It literally is, I was looking through this digital exhibition for Bending Lines webpage. It occurred to me sort of the first time I really thought seriously about the editorialization process in mapping was when you just brought it up. And I feel a little bit ashamed of that because I'm a trained lawyer and I know about redlining and all sorts of gerrymandering and things like that. And so thank you for sort of turning on the light there in that process. My question is, what does the Map Center do discreetly or in collaboration with BPL around geographic information system mapping or GIS? And is that an area, a possible area either for growth or educational programming? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And we certainly have found that that kind of aha moment happens pretty often with this exhibition. People have thought, I never realized that maps might be lying to me, or that every map has a kind of perspective. And that's really one of our goals, is to show, there's certainly some kind of howler maps in the show, like, oh, of course this is a map that you might want to distrust, but also a challenge for us has been, how do you raise people's skepticism without putting them in this kind of paranoid, I can't trust anything kind of mentality, and focusing on this social process of how belief and accuracy and reliability, that of course goes well beyond maps to a very big social and political question about shared trust. The GIS question certainly dovetails with Jeff's earlier question, and absolutely, I think we really are trying to focus on the tools that are needed for ordinary people to access this kind of work. I oftentimes use the metaphor, if you wanted to publish a book even 30 years ago, you had to know typesetting and all of those sorts of things. Now, pretty much anybody can use Microsoft Word to publish some documents, right? The technical barrier has come way, way down. That's not true for map making. The technical barriers for map making are still very high. It's still very difficult, even for people who want to say, I want to show 4 dots of schools I've visited on a map. So we're really trying to work with teachers, with the public, about what do people need in order to engage with what they want to do. Sometimes that means they need really computationally sophisticated type of stuff, but oftentimes it means that they need people. They need some assistance. They need some guidance. They need well-written explainers and tools like that. And we talk a lot about this, like making maps a two-way conversation. So instead of people just kind of passively looking at maps that other people have made, what would it require for you to make a map about, the correspondence between COVID deaths and housing costs in Boston, right? Like, that data is free and available, but in order to do something like that, you need hopefully an institution like us to help you make it possible.
And one focus, I'll give credit where credit's due, which is to one of our former staff members and also Garrett. There's been a lot of emphasis on writing documentation that lives online, that kind of helps, that was used in coordination with the online course Garrett mentioned, but that kind of can serve as a landing place for sort of collecting folks who maybe are interested in doing something and don't know where to start. And that also kind of points them out to scheduling research visits or appointments with our assistant curator to kind of try and get them to a person as quickly as possible when they get confused or when there's kind of questions that aren't answered in the documentation.
The only other thing I'll add very quickly is, it certainly points to some of the challenges of a map center, in that, we've touched on the really extraordinarily broad portfolio of responsibilities, from, conserving 15th century, physical materials, all the way through programming GIS, right? And so we are always trying to be really careful about where are there synergies between that type of work and where are we getting stretched too thin, right? It's hard to do all of those things really well at once. And, you know, I certainly see our partnerships with the rest of the library as offering some real opportunities. You know, the preservation department can help us with preservation questions. Special collections curators can help us with practices around accessioning and, you know, and intellectual control of materials. The, you know, folks working in media literacy and adult programs can, we're going to do an adult program with one of the BPL librarians this next month about media literacy and those kinds of engagements. So figuring out where we can kind of bring a geographic and map perspective into the work that's being done across the library is really important to keep us from feeling like, you know, how can we possibly do all these things at once?
I don't want to shortcut any of this great conversation, but I know Ellen's about to leave, and I think you know, this collaboration and what you've just heard today wouldn't be possible without the long-term relationship and support of the Leventhal family. So I want to, on behalf of the library, just once again and meaningfully thank Ellen and the family for their long-term partnership on this. In many ways, I love that this is both part of our special collections, but also, as you have seen, has a little more agility than the rest of the institution has sometimes to pilot new programs that, you know, that we all will learn from and can continue to incorporate into how we execute our mission.
Ben, if I can make a comment?
Please.
David, thank you for those very kind words. I have to tell you from the Map Center standpoint, we are absolutely thrilled with this partnership with the library. And Garrett's leadership has been outstanding. I sing his praises at our board meetings. I will sing our praises here. I think what Garrett has done, he has an understanding of the digital world. He understands how to reach people. And there is something special about maps, which my father recognized as a way to educate. It tells us about the opportunities to improve our lives. It tells us about the injustices of the past. You know, maps don't have feelings, but they do create good things and they do create bad things. And it is a great way to educate. I think the power of the Map Center and with Garrett's leadership and Emily and the team they've assembled is the power to reach, you know, a digital world, which is a different world than we grew up in. And the other distinction is we can talk about what the relationship is and the formal relationship and how we're different than the library. As far as the public is concerned, we're one and the same. We feel, you know, they think of us as the library. Our success is the library's success. The library's success is our success. And we see this as a powerful relationship to enrich what the public library is. And we are as excited about this relationship as we've ever have been. We have a star in Garrett. We have a star in you, David, in the library administration, and you, Priscilla, as chair. And we just think there's tremendous things we can do together in the future. My only regret is if I am successful in my process with the Senate, is that I will miss this for the next few years. But you can be assured I'm going to be watching it very closely.
Thanks very much, Alan. And we hope we see you in April, but if not, best of luck in Copenhagen.
Thanks very much, Ben. Bye-bye.
So I think we're on to new business now in this section of the agenda. I don't have any. David, do you have something you want to mention here?
No, just that we intend for the next meeting, if schedules will allow, to be able to do the preview tour for members of the committee, which will not be part of the public meeting. It will not be a meeting, but it will be before the next meeting if we can get the schedule to work. And then we would anticipate that the next briefing, again, schedules allow, would be by Jay Michella and the team from Rare Books and Manuscripts, because that's what the new space will actually host. So that's where we're headed next.
Great. Well, Garrett and Emily, thank you again for great presentations. Really, really enlightening.
Thanks for having us.
Pamela, are there any public comments?
We do not have any signups for public comment.
Okay. In that case, I'll take a motion to adjourn if anyone would like to make that motion.
So moved.
Second.
So the ayes have it. We're adjourned. Thank you very much. See you in April.
Bye, everyone.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. See you April 13th. Thank you, Jay. Can you close that down for me?
Thanks, Pamela.
Thank
I'm
you,
working on
Jay.
it. Every time someone leaves, it closes my menu, so I can't click the button.
I know it does that. Yeah.
Take care.
Thank you, Jay.
Jay, did they put you on punishment there, blocked you out of the system?
Sometimes.
Gee whiz. Well, thank you very much for getting us all on and taking care of us. And Pamela, thank you for supporting Ben and moving the agenda along. Take
No
care.
problem.
See you guys later.
Take care.